So good evening, everybody. I'd like to call the Monday, June 29th, 2020 special school board meeting to order. Lisa, can you please call the roll?
Inspector Walker.
Here.
Inspector Laliberty.
Here.
Inspector Aaron.
Here.
Inspector Felton.
Present. Oh.
Just a reminder to mute your mics when you're not speaking.
Paul, is that you and me? No?
It might have been me, because I just shut my phone off.
Okay.
I think it was me because I was walking. The telephone always rings once we get on the camera, and I think it was me. So I'll take it home.
Inspector Felton.
Present.
Inspector Diaz.
Here.
Inspector Bjorklund.
Here.
Chair McClellan is absent. There's 6 present.
Great. So the first item on the agenda this evening is for the approval of tonight's meeting agenda. Do I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
So thank you, Bill. A second?
Second.
Thanks, Patty. Any discussion? All right.
Yeah, so
oh, sorry.
Linda, this is Aaron. Paul and I just kind of have a brief summary for you. And then we'd like to go in and vote when we're done presenting.
Do we want to vote, or do we want to vote first and then present, or present and then vote?
I think present and then vote. Correct, Lisa?
Yep. So when we get down to the business items, we'll ask for a motion to approve and then a second. And at that point, Aaron, you and Paul will come in, do your discussion piece, and then we'll vote after that.
We're just approving the agenda.
I'm sorry, that's my fault.
That's all right. All right. So Lisa, will you please roll or call the roll?
Inspector Diaz.
Yes.
Inspector Bjorklund.
Yes.
Inspector Walker.
Yes.
Inspector Laliberty.
I forgot what we're voting on.
The agenda.
Oh, yes.
Inspector Aaron.
Yes.
Inspector Felton.
Yes.
And that is 6 yeas.
Motion carries. All right. So moving on, I'm looking for a motion to approve the lease agreement for financing technology purchases. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thanks, Chris. A second?
Yes. Second.
You have to say the words.
Second.
Thanks, Bill. Now, Aaron and Paul, can you give us some background on this item?
I'm sorry about that. My apologies.
That's all right.
I'll turn it over to Paul and he can talk about the device purchases. And then I'll just mention the financing part of it.
Okay.
Right. This is a lease for 2 purchases. One that was started back in February, actually, as part of our regular device replacement cycle for students. 600 HP Chromebook 11s. It's the device that we've standardized on. We just buy whatever generation is available in the given year that we place the order. This is generation 8 right now. It's to be the most durable and the most problem-free Chromebooks that we have had in our fleet. And that's why we've stayed with this manufacturer over the past several years and have basically standardized on that. So this first purchase of 600 that was placed earlier actually had an interesting detour, I'll just say, because it got canceled originally by HP somewhere in March because of their supply lines tightening out of China. And it was re-implemented and we received some pretty good discounts on it, actually, to keep it at the same price at which we had ordered it. Prices had gone up since, but we got it at the same price from that point on. Most of it, once again, is going to replacement cycle. Some of it will also augment some of the elementary device stocks. Second part of the order is for 335 additional devices, and these are mostly focused on our earlier grades. It's a combination of Acer Chromebook tablets, which are used in first and kindergarten, and HP Chromebooks, again, but with touchscreen, which we use as a transitional device for second graders. Moves in between sort of a tablet interface into more of a standard laptop interface that gets used from 3rd grade on. Primary purpose of these is to both augment some of the stock that we anticipate having lost over the distance learning period, but also primarily to bring the elementary grades from 3 down to K to a 1-to-1 basis. What we realized in this process was 2 things of distance learning. Is that first of all, for families to be successful at home with this technology, having one of our devices makes it almost instant for them. They don't have to do a lot of configuration of their own devices. We did spend a lot of time with families trying to make it work on their own devices. In the end, we just basically asked them to come in and get a district Chromebook because it was just that much easier to do from that standpoint. The second is that if we're not in distance learning or some form of hybrid mode in the fall and we're all face-to-face, There's no way in this pandemic era that we can have students sharing devices within a class period. That very simple fact is really what's driving this purchase, bringing us one-to-one. We always kind of talked about these grade levels being 1 to 2. Sometimes I would say that the best accessory to a computer in this case was a second chair for kids to share a device. In this case, the actual sharing and the passing of devices back and forth just doesn't make practical sense within the school day due to the sanitation needs. So we would look forward to all of our elementary grade device users having a specific device assigned to them for use during any school day, so that we're not passing germs back and forth as we're passing devices. That's the rationale behind that add-on purchase of 335 devices. I'm going to pause right there and see if you have any questions for me.
I have a question.
Yes, Patty.
So are we recycling the old one?
The old ones that are being retired from our fleet are mostly ones that were purchased in 2016, excuse me. And yeah, we do recycle those. In fact, they usually get purchased from us. We have some residual value for those.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So what we usually do is some combination of keeping some of the units back for some non-critical uses. In some cases, like for daily checkouts for kids who forget their devices at home, those sorts of things. And then the rest we usually have purchased off of us for somewhere around $10 to $15 a unit, which after 5 years is a pretty good residual value that we can get off of them. So that's how we operate with a lot of our technology. Generally, because of this, we don't have to pay to recycle. And generally, we come out ahead from a revenue standpoint in that whole operation with the sales that go on with it as well.
Well, it's also good to participate for the sake of the earth in the recycling process. So I'm glad.
Yes, there's also that, and I'm very keenly aware of that. I was thinking the financial part, but the other thing that we are careful about that our recyclers are certified to do that, and that they have clean practices in their recycling processes. They're not sending boatloads of mercury out to Africa or something like that.
Very good. Thank you, Paul.
Yep.
And the cost for these new computers, could we just verify that?
Yeah, I can give you a per unit cost first, and then Aaron, I think you have the totals there. But for each of these Chromebooks, we do have to buy a license for them from Google, and that license lasts 6 years essentially. They're extending it out to 8, but Chromebooks don't last quite that long, so that's not really a benefit. The cost of that license is generally $24. It retails at $30. We always get a discount from our suppliers on it. And then for the units themselves, the Chromebooks 600 are $197 a piece. Those prices are a little bit higher than what we were buying last year. We were usually getting around $180 to $185. Part of that has to do with supply chains and the shutdowns that happened in China in the winter and early spring. So we expect those to go back down again in a year or so. For the touchscreen Chromebooks, those are running $246 a unit. And is obviously the expense in that. Otherwise, the units are identical to what we're buying for every other grade level. The tablets are coming in really low. They were discounted for us. So quite a bit below what was originally quoted to me back in February. We're getting those for $323 this year. Our first buy of those tablets was at over $300 a unit about 3 years ago now, and the quote earlier in the winter was about $260, but we're getting for $323.
And the funding for that?
The funding that is
from the levy?
That comes from the levy, and
Okay.
we're funding it via lease.
Okay.
To that a little bit about why we're doing a lease at this point. And it's really to get our costs regularized a little bit on devices. We've had sort of bubbles of purchases as we expanded out our secondary. We did that over 2 years. There was 1 year where we bought 1,200 Chromebooks, for example.
Whoa.
Chromebooks are coming due in about a year and a half, so we're trying to get ahead of that replacement cycle a little bit here. But also what we want to do is get it to, it'll probably be a level something like this, 500 or 600 a year. The Chromebook life cycle in a one-to-one program where kids take it home is probably right around 4.5 years right now. For one that stays in school, it's slightly over 5 years. And then once again, that's the point where we're getting down to about 75% attrition on the Chromebooks. And then we have some residual value for use after that, but that's the point where we do that. So we're looking at partly using the lease to regularize our replacement cycle and also get down from an accounting standpoint to what is our annual cost per kid for technology. We're trying to do that with our staff as well, rather than dealing with it as episodic purchases, start to think about it as a year-on-year cost from a budgeting standpoint. The lease helps us do that.
Yeah, Paul, my question is, we're leasing all these Chromebooks as compared to purchasing them outright. What's the difference?
The difference is a small finance charge over the 5 years or the 4 years of the lease. And you'll hear in this one, we have an option to extend to a 5th year on it. that is the major difference in terms of a total cost standpoint. The real difference in the lease, though, for us is once again spreading out replacement cycles. We can get this regularized, so we have that annual cost that doesn't balloon and jump up and down every year. We have pressure in our budget from increasing cost of apps for our students and teachers. It kind of drives us as well. So we don't have as much headroom as we had 5 years ago in our budget to make a lot of outright purchases of large numbers.
I like to think of it going in to buy a car and having cash to buy the car on site, or taking a 4-year loan to spread your car payments over 4 years. Lets us afford the devices for our kids, especially as Paul said, to keep kids safe and not share devices in the elementary grades. We think is important for the fall.
Well, it makes sense. I'm just curious, when we send the devices home with the kids, is there a certain percentage that never make it back, or are they pretty good about getting all of them back, or what does that look like?
Wow,
Well,
needing repairs.
I'm sorry, Linda, I heard you add something.
Sorry, or needing repairs, which ones are broken.
Right.
Yeah, and the one thing we do know is that when Chromebooks go home in a one-to-one program, they are more susceptible to damage. We have provided, and we didn't get a chance to do this because of the speed with which we deployed our elementary devices this spring. But most of our one-to-one Chromebooks are in an always-on case that has a very stiff cover, so they're well protected. But kids like to take them out of the case, and everything starts to happen at that point. So yeah, there are repairs that happen. I think our repair costs last year were something close to $21,000 for the whole year. And our insurance fund is currently covering that. We are also looking at some other insurance options that we can do that also help protect against accidental loss, and would probably be a lot more attractive to our parents as well than our current insurance program. Cover a lot more and get a larger buy-in to that. But yeah, definitely when they go home, they become somewhat more susceptible to damage. I asked my staff just off the cuff for an impression, and we're going to track this a little bit more closely, but for our one-to-one program at the secondary school, what percentage of damage happened in school while the devices were being carried around in school versus on the trip home and back? And we think it was something about 60-40 in our estimate, but we'll get some real numbers on that over the next year to see what it looks like. 60% on home and 40% happening locally in the school.
Interesting. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other comments, discussion needed? I think Aaron is next, right?
Yeah, I just wanted to just make note about the financing. When invest, kind of at what cost. You can see in the cover page to the board report, we have a 4-year lease at a 0.25% interest rate. So when looking at financing this, it's only going to cost us about a couple $1,000 over the course of the 5 years to finance this. With the fact that Paul mentioned we have options at the end of the 4 years. So we can extend the lease for a 5th year if we feel like we're getting an extended life out of the equipment. We can return the equipment to the financing company, or we can purchase the equipment from them at a predetermined rate. And so this company, Vantage Financial, works with many other school districts in Minnesota and across the country, financing equipment like this, especially technology equipment. So we did explore other options that are out there, more standard financing options, and the rates were significantly higher. And so we really feel like that this is our best option moving forward, and forward to working with this company into the future here. So that's all I have on the financing side.
Great. Any other thoughts? All right, Lisa, will you please call the roll?
Inspector Felton,
Yes.
Inspector Diaz,
Yes.
Inspector Bjorklund,
Yes.
Inspector Walker,
Yes.
Inspector Lalaberty,
Yes.
Inspector Arendt.
Yes.
That's 6 yeas.
Motion carries. All right, the next item is for the approval of the property liability, cyber liability, and workers' compensation insurance for 2020, 2021. Do I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Thanks, Patty. Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks, Bill. Aaron, I think you were going to share some information on this.
Yes, thank you. You can see in the board packet just a summary of the proposed different insurance carriers for the next year. Typically what we do is Dave and I will handle this from a management perspective, but thought it was important since we are proposing a change to bring this to the board for your approval. So just a couple of comments regarding what we've done. So we did approach the finance committee, I think it was like January, February, to talk about what our options look like for our insurance program. So you can see under the property liability insurance, we did evaluate 3 different options for that coverage, including our current carrier, Hanover Insurance, as well as a third option. It's called the Minnesota Insurance Scholastic Trust. And so that option is an insurance pool that is managed by a company by the name of Gallagher. We actually use them for our health insurance and dental insurance needs as well. And so this pool is comprised of 24 other Minnesota school districts that get into a pool type insurance agreement where there is some self-insurance component to this, but are also kind of reinsured by other insurance companies. And so I was really intrigued by this potential. So we did evaluate this option. However, financially for us, it did not make sense for the upcoming school year. And so based on the proposals that we received back, we are proposing to move to a company by the name of Hanover Insurance for our insurance for the 2021 fiscal year. Second, we have cyber liability insurance, and we are proposing to stay with a company by the name of CFC. They pretty much gave us a proposal with 0 change for the next year. And then finally, you can see workers' compensation. We are proposing to stay with a company by the name of SFM. We've used them for many years, and we've built a strong, good working relationship with them, which is important when it comes to workers' compensation insurance. And so our proposal for 2020-21 is property liability insurance with Hanover, cyber liability insurance with CFC, and then workers' compensation insurance with a company by the name of SFM. So that was just a real brief summary. As I mentioned, we worked through Finance Committee a little bit to really explore what our options are. They learned a little bit more about that pool as well. And so that'll continue to be an option for us as we move forward. So with that, I can answer any questions you have about insurance.
Aaron, is this a 1-year limit or longer?
Yep, this is just for 1 year. Starts July 1st, 2020 and ends June 30th, 2021.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Aaron, is a 1-year term pretty standard, or is that something special?
Yes, nope, a 1 year is what we always do. Just a 1-year agreement.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? All righty, Lisa, will you please call the roll.
Yes, Inspector Laliberty,
Yes.
Inspector Arndt,
Yes.
Inspector Felton,
Yes.
Inspector Diaz,
Yes.
Inspector Bjorklund,
Yes.
Inspector Walker.
Yes.
That's 6 yeas.
So motion carries. That's it for our business items. So we'll move on to the reports and discussion items. The first item is enrollment. Dr. Webb and Aaron, we'll start with you.
Thank you. Aaron worked extremely hard pulling together details for the past several years of enrollment trends. So we have, if you look at a snapshot of the past 10 years, from 10 years ago to about 4 years ago, we had upward trending enrollment. And for the past 3 years, specifically now, we've had downward trending enrollment. And we're going to show you as many details as we can about some slices of the data, and keep making notes of the questions that you have along the way. I just want to thank Nikki for just saying, hey, we need to talk about this as a board, because we do. It's a key component of our district. It drives all the revenue for our school district. So, and it can't be just kind of a one and done conversation. We need to, especially with our board chair not being able to be here tonight, we're gonna have to keep this conversation going forward. And in order to be able to answer your questions well, we're gonna need to swim in this water for several, and I'll just say many months, because we have to come out of the water with better ideas, better plans, and direction. Okay, so Aaron, I'll kick it to you to start the slide deck.
All right, and I think Lisa will help us here by presenting. And as Lisa mentioned, when we sent this information out, there are charts and tables and graphs in this presentation, and so it might be a little bit challenging to see. So feel free to jump in and ask if you need any clarification or have any more detailed questions on this presentation. So just kind of an overview on this information that is being presented. So as a reminder, all of this is being presented in terms of average daily membership, or ADM. And again, that's how we receive our funding, how we report our enrollment data to the state. So it's all based on this ADM information. Everything on this presentation is strictly from grades K through 12. As a reminder, we do receive funding for early childhood special education, or ECSE, and voluntary pre-kindergarten, or VPK. But that information is not included in this presentation. We're strictly looking from K through 12. And then just to note that the 2019-20 information is considered preliminary and is subject to change. So South St. Paul, along with any other Minnesota school district, actually can make adjustments to our enrollment as necessary over the course of approximately the next 4 to 6 months. And so while I do consider this information to be pretty accurate and don't expect any significant changes from this, there could be some minor tweaks here and there, just so everyone is aware. So the next slide just reviews our enrollment, or our ADM calculation, right? So we start with the number of resident students that live in South St. Paul. Then of course we have students that live in South St. Paul, but that choose to attend other districts. Those are known as options out, or enrollment options out. Then we also have South St. Paul residents that choose to attend charter schools. So you subtract those, and then you add back in any students that live outside of the South St. Paul boundary that choose to attend school here. And those are options in, or enrollment options in. So
Aaron,
Yep.
quick question, please.
Yes.
Where do we calculate homeschool students in this listing?
Yep. So that's a great question, Wendy. So I don't have any homeschool or non-public school information in here. And the only reason is that is kind of not an integral part of our student reporting system, but is definitely some information that I could get for the 1920 school year. So.
Yeah, I was just wondering as to how many students we don't have in our schools that are being homeschooled in South St. Paul as resident kids.
Sure. I can get that information. And we have some of that historical data too that was presented last fall. So I can definitely get that information for you. So then that's so minus the homeschool non-public students, this is the math behind our ADM calculation and what we receive funding for. So the next slide shows a history of the number of K-12 students that live in South St. Paul. So you can see that number peaked in 2016-17. So the fourth column from the right. So we had 3,231 K-12 students living within South St. Paul boundary. On the far right-hand column is this current year, 2019-20, where we were at 3,092. And so that was a 62 student drop from the previous year. So overall, we've been decreasing in that number over the course of the past 4 years. The next slide is the number of students that we actually serve in South St. Paul. If you remember the calculation from a couple slides ago, this is how many actual K-12 students we served here. So you can see and the fifth column from the right is 2015-16, and that was the highest we've had it over the course of the past 10 plus years. That number was 3,472 K-12 students during that year. As you can see, we have been declining over the course of since 2015-16. For the 2019-20 school year, the year we just wrapped up in the far right-hand column, that is currently at 3,141 students. So again, decreasing over the course of the past 5 years. The next slide shows just a comparison between the previous two charts that I showed, previous two graphs. And so again, the dark red is the number of students that we've served, and the light red is the number of students that live in South St. Paul. So you can see back 6, 7, 8 years ago, that spread was pretty significant between how many we actually served and how many that lived in South St. Paul, meaning that we had a larger open enrollment population coming into the district. As you move to the right across the slide, you can see that gap has narrowed to where the number of students that live in South St. Paul is pretty close to the number of students that we're actually serving within our district. And I've got some more information here that breaks that information down a little bit more. So I'll just do a quick pause there and see if anybody has questions around any of this data at all.
I'd just like to reiterate, Aaron, the reason I asked that question regarding homeschooling, there was a report on TV several days ago that many districts are seeing a reduction in students that want to go back to classrooms and because their parents want to start instructing them at home. So I was just curious to see if we're going to see that type of a situation here in South St. Paul also, where children will be staying home, being homeschooled by their parents more than what we normally would expect out of a year.
Sure. Yep. And I think it's a great question, Wendy, especially given the environment that we're in right now. What I can do is as we get closer to wrapping up here, I can just take a quick look, and I've got a number I know for 2018-19, so I can just let you know that, so everyone kind of has a context of what that means for us here. So
Thank you.
Aaron, could I add one more thing too? Is our team is still working on, and the state says be prepared for all three options for when we return in the fall. So be ready to have all students back, or be ready to have some students back and some at home, alternating like a hybrid type schedule. And then also be ready for full distance learning if need be, if the pandemic worsens and we have to go in that direction. But if you look at what the state did for summer programs, they said you can either be hybrid, partially on site, or you can be in distance learning. So come August, when the state gives us direction, they very well could give us a couple of options. So like you could go hybrid and distance learning, because there will be some families that don't feel safe coming back to school in the fall if the pandemic is still present. So we're preparing. So rather than homeschool being the only option for families, we want to make sure that we have an option, a South St. Paul option here as well. So our team is working on that currently.
Dave, a quick question on that. How do we handle that hybrid situation financially? Or is the state going to come in and provide extra funding?
So that's part of all the challenge that our team has to work through. And I would just say, and 340 other school districts in the state. We don't anticipate additional state dollars. The state budget went on a negative $4 billion swing in the last reporting session. I believe that the state will continue to go negative in their budget. So we can't count on additional state dollars. So we have to make sure that we are providing and planning for no cost increase. And if you talk to a lead team member, one of our leadership team members, they're knowing that the conversations have been very difficult about staffing. They're very frugal with how we're planning for all of our staffing decisions moving forward. And especially if we are in full pandemic mode and we're in full distance learning mode, we're going to be having to make more and more difficult staffing conversations. So we're not planning for extra money and more money. We're planning for how do we do hybrid on the same budget and make the end result all work out.
I have some questions and comments, but I'd like to wait until the end of the presentation.
Sure.
I've got a few too that I can wait on.
Yeah, keep your notes going. Like I said, this isn't a one and done. We're going to have to stay in this enrollment conversation for months.
And I'll just jump in quick here. So the benefit of doing this in front of your computer, right? You can pull up all the information. So we, for the 1920 school year, we had 44 homeschool families. So if you look over, or I'm sorry, not families, students, 44 students. And so if you look over the course of the past 6 or 7 years, it's been in that 45 to 50 enrollment range for homeschool families. So,
thank you, Aaron.
Yep. Okay, I will move on. So this next slide shows the open enrollment in the red. So this is ADM history over the course of the past 11 years, showing the open enrollment numbers. So open enrollment in on the red, you can see there was an increase there. And since we reached the peak in 2015-16, so 66 open enrollment in during that year. That number has steadily decreased to 643 open enrollment in during the 2019-20 school year. Then on the bottom in the blue is open enrollment out. And so again, this is any student that lives in South St. Paul that either chooses to attend another school district or chooses to attend a charter school. And so you can see that has been increasing over the course of time to where now that number is 595. So when we talk about our open enrollment kind of net gain or loss, we were an open enrollment gain of approximately 48 students. And so again, that 48 number is the 643 that are open enrolling in minus the 595 that are open enrolling out. So just some trend data there around what the open enrollment looks like. On the next slide is the open enrollment in. And so I know there's a lot of small numbers here and color coding, but what we're trying to show is kind of both in total, the open enrollment trend data, as well as by district. And so we identified the 5 districts that we received the most students from outside of South St. Paul. So on the bottom is blue, Inver Grove Heights, then red is St. Paul, green is West St. Paul, purple is South Washington County, and then kind of that teal is Rave or Rosemont, Apple Valley, Egan, and then the orange is other. So just trying to show the changes there by district for open enrollment in. The next slide is the same exact information, just in a table view. So, you know, some people like to learn by seeing the numbers, others like to learn by seeing the graphs and the colors. So again, just similar information, just presented in a different way. So a couple of things to point out. So Inver Grove Heights is our largest open enrollment in district. You can see, however, that has been decreasing over the course of time. So we currently are at 275 students. If you look in that upper right-hand corner, 275 open enrollment in students from Inver Grove Heights. The second is St. Paul. You can see we currently open enroll in 137 students from St. Paul, 97 from West St. Paul in the third line, 51 from South Washington County, 39 from Rosemont, and then 43 from other. So just a different way of looking at that information. The next slide looks exactly the same, but this is open enrollment out. So this is all South St. Paul residents choosing another school district. So again, it's the same color coding by district. We have the same 5 districts where we have the most significant open enroll out. So just a graphical representation of what that has looked like over the course of time. The next slide is the same exact thing. So it's a table look at open enrollment out. Again, Inver Grove Heights is 118 students out. West St. Paul is 126 students out. St. Paul is 68. Rosemont, 37. South Washington County is 7. And then all other districts are 50 for the 2019-20 school year. So 406 students, South St. Paul students, chose to attend another school district in 2019-20. The next slide is the net open enrollment. So this is an attempt to look at by district what the open enrollment trends have looked like. And so in the blue is Inver Grove Heights. So if you look on the far left-hand side, back in 2009, 2010, our open enrollment net for Inver Grove Heights was 289 students. So that was an overall gain for us of 289. If you look on the far right-hand side then of that blue line, in 2019-20, that net was 157 students. So we're still an open enrollment gain from Inver Grove Heights, but that number has been lower over the course of the past 10 or 11 years as we analyze this data. In the red is St. Paul. There we moved from an open enrollment net gain of 49 students back in 2009-10 up to 69 students. In the purple is all other districts. So that went from 69 down to 40. And then in the green is West St. Paul. So back 10, 11 years ago, we had an open enrollment gain of 31 students. And now we have an open enrollment loss for West St. Paul of negative 29 students this past school year. So all with similar trend for Inver Grove Heights and West St. Paul. We see kind of those decreasing trends. The other districts in St. Paul have remained relatively constant. So just a look at a different way to look at South St. Paul resident students. So on the right-hand side is the 2009-10 school year. So during that year, 87.5% of all students that lived in South St. Paul attended South St. Paul schools. Then in the red, 7.5% of South St. Paul students chose another district. 2.4% in the green chose a charter school. And 2.6% in purple had a tuition agreement. Typically, those are with our intermediate districts for those students. On the left-hand side now is 2019-20. So in the blue, for all South St. Paul residents, 79.3% chose to attend South St. Paul schools. So you can see that at 87.5%, 11 years ago, moved down to 79.3%. Then in the red, options out. So again, attending other school districts is at 13.1% in the red. Charter schools is up to 6.1% in the green. And tuition is 1.4% in the purple. So just a look as far as what proportionate share of South St. Paul residents chose South St. Paul, and if not, what were their other decisions? So with that, I know I'm going through a lot of information here, so I can stop here to see if you need any clarifications on this data at all. Okay, hearing none, I will keep moving forward. So now this is a similar look at our charter schools. So South St. Paul residents choosing charter schools. So there are different charter schools listed here. I'll work from the bottom up. So in the blue is Discovery Charter School in Inver Grove Heights. You can see that they opened in 2016-17, and South St. Paul students started attending during that year, and that has grown to 62 in 2019-20. Then in the red is Minnesota Transitions Charter School. They have a variety of different offerings regarding their programming, including an online component. In the green is Nova Classical Academy. They're out of St. Paul. In the purple is Academic Arts High School, and they're out of West St. Paul. And then in the teal is the Hmong College Prep Academy, and they're also located in St. Paul. And then on the top in the orange is all other charter schools. So I don't have the exact number on me, but I do know that there are obviously a significant amount of charter schools in the state of Minnesota. And so we do have a wide variety of charter schools that our South St. Paul students are choosing to attend. The next slide is the same exact information, just in a table form to show some trend data there as far as what enrollment has looked like for the charter schools. Okay, the next slide is a little different look now. So this is just to show you the enrollment. Again, this is average daily membership by grade level for the 2019-20 school year. So you can see, starting in grades 4 and moving forward, those class sizes tend to be in that 250, 260 student range, with the exception of a smaller 11th grade class size. Then if you look at kindergarten, grade 1, grade 2, and grade 3, you can see smaller numbers. What we have seen is incoming kindergarten class sizes around that 230 number over the course of the past 4 years. You will see a pretty sharp decrease in grade 2 and grade 3, where those class sizes are at 211 and 213. We did present some of this information last fall, and we did see some specific movement out in those grade levels, and not necessarily South St. Paul families choosing other options. What we did see was a lot of actually physical movement out of the South St. Paul community. And so this is part of the reason I'm showing this, is to show for planning for future years. Obviously, barring any significant changes, we'll have those smaller class sizes that will continue to move through our system for a number of years. And so we'll know that we'll put some downward pressure on our overall enrollment as we move forward into future years. So just point about some next steps. So we'll do a little bit deeper enrollment dive by building and by grade, and we'll get some more reasons as far as a look at reasons for enrollment change. We have some pretty good just internal data that we keep that we can identify if a family no longer attends South St. Paul, if they made that choice for a specific reason, or if their family just simply moved out of the South St. Paul community, and that's why they no longer attend here. So that just takes some more time to dig into that information, but we're more than willing to take a closer look at that. So with that, that concludes my presentation. We have a slide here for questions you have about this information, or if you're looking for anything additional that would help you kind of learn more about our overall enrollment picture. So with that, I will stop talking and over to Dave or Linda on next steps for our conversation here.
So
Yeah.
can I just echo that second question that you asked is especially important about what additional data do you need as board members? We gave you many different slices, but there could be 10 different things that you could come up with, and we can say we can get that for you. And like I said, we need to swim here for a while just to really get grounded in all the enrollment data. So that question, what other data do you need, is one that I'd like you to all reflect on.
So I think it's great data. I appreciate it. I think we know where our kids are going. We know where kids are coming in from, but it doesn't really hit on the why piece. And I hear you saying, Dave, that, you know, we got to swim a little, but we've had declining enrollment for lots of years. And we should know. I think we had that survey where, you know, families had said that behaviors were an issue, the families who were leaving. So we implemented MTSS, you know, got more counselors. I think the data that I'm needing going forward is twofold. We didn't really have a full year of MTSS to be able to evaluate if it helped. You know, we weren't able to say, you know, your child had a full year of an additional counselor, and what do you think about that? So I think we're missing that data, and we're probably not going to get it. The other thing that I wanted to say was I don't want us to confuse the pandemic issue with declining enrollment in the past, because I think those are two very separate things. I also think it's going to muddy our data going forward. So we're not really going to be able to separate one from the other to say, this is why. I think Wendy's point about homeschooling, I'd seen some other great articles on the same, that because distance learning didn't go well, families are just, you know, taking charge and doing it themselves. So I think we're going to have, at least for the next year, some really muddy data. And how are we planning for that? Because it's not really going to give us what we need with the declining enrollment for the last, you know, for sure 5 years in Sault Ste. Paul.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. Nikki?
Yeah, I'd like to echo what Linda said. For me, I think there's a bigger issue at stake here at hand, and all of this data is you know, interesting, but it's one tool. And it really doesn't get to the heart or the meat of the matter. I think data and, you know, on all the research, and I certainly appreciate the work that goes into collecting all of this and organizing it. I also think it puts up a wall between head and heart work. And I think we are declining enrollment, and, you know, I mean, certainly there are many different reasons that people are moving and changing and so forth, but I think there's a bigger issue here, and maybe we even need to talk and look at enrollment in a different way. It's that sort of that definition of insanity, you know, where you just keep doing the same thing expecting different results. Maybe we need to have a real shift in thinking on enrollment, and what are we needing South St. Paul kids' needs, and the staff and the families. I mean, obviously it's a three-legged stool, but I find all this data, and you guys all know this about me already, I find it very off-putting, and I think it diverts us from maybe the real conversation that we need to have.
Thanks. We heard from 2 board members. Can we hear from 4 others?
Yeah, I guess, Dave, my questions would be regarding the students coming in and going out. Are there certain grade levels that we're seeing these kids coming in for, or certain grade levels we're seeing them going out for? I guess personally, I'm not super familiar with a lot of these the charter schools. So I don't know, other than like obviously academic arts high school, you know, your older kids. I mean, how many of our students are going just for their 11th, 12th grade class, you know, years, or are they just coming in for the kindergarten years? And if they're coming in, I know we have done, I know, checks on that in the past, how many kids are coming in just for like kindergarten, first grade, and how many of them are coming in, going out, which grade levels. And if there's a certain grade level that kids are exiting on, that might be something to just spend some focus time on. Or if there's grade levels that kids are really coming in for, whether it's our IB program at the secondary building, just, you know, kind of focus on some of those things that are really pluses for us and the minuses as to which grades are being most affected by students coming in or going out.
Thank you.
I can jump in.
I wonder
Well, I guess
if,
I can't jump in. Okay,
uh-oh. Bill, you want to go first? You can.
go ahead, Patty.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Bill. I just want to acknowledge the fact of the changing landscape of school. And when we have all these choices out there, I think it's inevitable that we are going to see students make those choices, their families make those choices. And that's not to say to throw in the towel, but it is to say to be realistic about it, and rather than beat ourselves up about it, maybe spend some energy projecting ways that we can possibly address it in a real public way, rather than wringing our hands. And so I guess I'm saying both and, you know, accept the fact that things have changed, but also now get to work and address those changes and find a way to communicate what we have to offer. And we've had those conversations before. And the third thing, I'd like to see some projections. I'd like to see, okay, what are you projecting for the future and how are we preparing for that? Thank you.
Thank you.
Is it okay if I jump in here for a second?
Go ahead, Bill.
Okay, well, one very interesting thing to me is to see if our outside enrollment goes up when our CLC center opens. And number two, I think it was Wendy's question about homeschooling. I think you're going to see a decrease in homeschooling after parents have spent 4 months in a closed environment with their kids. And so we can't really predict anything because we have nothing to base our predictions on. We've never lived through a COVID. We've never lived through a George Floyd, and we've never lived through being curfewed. So it's going to be interesting, and a lot of what we're going to do is going to have to be, you know, speculation and by the seat of our pants. And I think as a district, we need everybody who's employed by the district to be a recruiter, to see somebody on the street and say, hey, I can pull some strings and get you into the South St. Paul School District. And if enough people do that and buy into it, I think maybe our problem is over. Okay.
Thank you. Chris?
Yeah, I'd be curious to see, you know, from a number standpoint, to see how things are trending at, you know, the state level, or if we could do a regional level. I don't know if that's data is available, but, you know, we see the quantity of kids coming into our district from outside of, you know, from the neighboring districts. We see that number decreasing, and while that's initially alarming, if you look at just, you know, our district, for example, the number of students in the district is decreasing. So perhaps that's the decreasing number of students coming in from other districts is just kind of trails their numbers decreasing as well. I hope I said that well enough to make sense. You know, if the number of students in Inver Grove Heights decreases, it stands to reason that the number that are electing to come to South St. Paul is decreasing too. So maybe it's not a symptom of something going wrong here. It's just that their quantity of students is decreasing. I get the feeling that that's happening at the state level, but I don't really have any data to back that up. And then the other thing too has been brought up by Nikki and Patty and others about just communicating what we're doing. I mean, we have talked about this, as Patty said, and are doing things which are very beneficial to the district and the students in there with the MTSS and all of the disciplinary changes in the handbooks and you know, things like the addition of the career readiness. I mean, those are incredible programs that offer great benefits to the students of South St. Paul, or address problems that we've had in the past. And I just wonder if the number of South St. Paul students leaving the district increasing is because of the perception that we've had in years past. And we just need to advertise better what we've done and how things have changed. I don't know, I'm just kind of throwing out ideas here. I certainly don't have the answers, and that's why we do need to keep talking about it, as Nikki said. But those are my thoughts anyway, and more to come, obviously.
Yeah, and then you throw in a $4 million budget deficit.
Right, that doesn't help.
Yeah. Any other thoughts from the board? Dave and Aaron, do you need anything else?
So just if you wake up in the middle of the night tonight and say, I should have asked for this data too, or I really am thinking that we need this information, just email us, call me, call Aaron. We can just continue to add to your list tonight. We also need to give space for our board chair to do the same. These are uncomfortable conversations, and we need to stay in this uncomfortable space until we can come out of it with a direction and really a will of the board and our leadership together. So I can reach out to Jeff tomorrow and just his thoughts, but just if you think of something tonight or tomorrow or next week or a couple of weeks from now, just let me know and we'll continue to dig there. And we'll continue to add to our data slices from the requests you put on the list tonight.
Well,
Thanks.
one other thing, Dave, I still have not forgotten your desire at one point several years ago about your immersion school, your Spanish immersion school.
We actually tested that in the.
I still have not forgotten.
Yeah, we tested that in this community survey we did about a year and a half ago, and
Yeah, I remember that, but it
didn't rank as high as other things. So, we have to listen to the voice of our community too. So, thanks.
Great.
That's all I've got.
All right. So that's it for our agenda tonight. And I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the Monday, June 29th, 2020 special meeting.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you very much. Lisa, will you please call the roll?
Inspector Walker,
Yes.
Inspector Lalaberty,
Yes.
Inspector Arend,
Yes.
Inspector Felton,
yes.
Inspector Diaz,
Yes.
Inspector Bjorklund. That's 6 yeas at 5:34.
Great. The motion carries. The June 29th, 2020 special meeting is adjourned. Thanks.